Well, so there's this great contrast of reality considered as what's in the space. That's what's there. And the space is simply what's not there. But you can't make it that simple, because you've only got to think about it one step to realize that you can't have the recognition or perhaps even the existence of what is there unless there is also what is not. In other words, I wouldn't be able to see you as moving human entities if you were all densely packed in some sort of material medium, like, say, Jell-O, or milk, or whatever, because then there would be no intervals between you to bring you out. You see? Now, actually, space must, in this connection, for a moment be considered from the point of view of optics. The eye is receptive to a certain spectrum of vibrations of light. And therefore, where such vibrations are not being transmitted, the nerve ends are not stimulated, and therefore don't report. And that failure to report is space. We call it darkness, where there is no visible light. But actually, there is nowhere in the universe where there is not some kind of vibration going on, so that if you had an instrument that responded to it, you would see that space was full of impulses. And if you saw it all, you wouldn't be able to make out the individual outlines which require these non-being intervals in order that their being can be realized, that is to say, outlined, distinguished, delineated, discriminated. So to see the outline of the being, you must have the intervening space of the non-being. But non-being means simply in this connection the lack of stimulation of whatever perceptive or perceiving instrument you are using. Now, for example, when you print a book, we say there is empty paper underneath the print. But of course, it isn't nothing under the print. It's nothing so far as print is concerned, but something very much so far as white paper is concerned. Now, do you see in the same way, perhaps it isn't nothing in which we are living and moving. It's only nothing so far as our visible shapes are concerned. But it is you could say this, that space is a something of a quite different order than ordinary something. Ordinary something being the things and events which we say occupy space, just as the print occupies the paper. But the philosophers, especially modern philosophers, have a great deal of trouble thinking about this. And the reason is that they are too one-sided in the kind of instruments they use for understanding the world. And the instrument they use principally is words and thought. Now, they have just as much trouble in thinking about the universe in terms of their words and thoughts and logical categories as you would have in a printed book, writing some words down which pointed directly to the paper underneath them. Supposing I say, there is paper underneath every word on this page. Now, the philosopher, the type of logical positivist, person who dominates American and British academic philosophy today, he would think that could only mean something if I wrote the sentence, there is paper under every word on this page. And then under each one of those words, I wrote the word paper, 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 paper. Then he would say, yes, that's true. But you see, that isn't the way it is. The difficulty is, you see, there is an incommensurability between the print and the paper. If we can stand outside that because we are diverse enough to realize that print is one process and paper is another, and they can be put together. But if you are immersed in the print, you can't see the paper. And so if you're immersed in the kind of consciousness which simply discriminates things, you cannot realize the background. That is to say, then, you cannot realize the nature of space when you use only your analytical consciousness. The consciousness which looks at things bit by bit by bit by bit, I call the spotlight consciousness. If you use that alone, then you can't think anything about the continuum, the ground in which all this flourishes. But you may then go on to make a mistake if you're not following me correctly. And this is the mistake, of course, that these kinds of philosophers fall into. If I say now, underneath all distinct things, space constitutes the ground in which they live and move and have their being, this is not quite correct. Because if I speak of space in that way, it makes it just another thing of the same kind and nature as all the things it contains. If, in other words, I can think about space, and I can only think about it by analogy, by likening it to paper, to a mirror, to the basis, the background, well, if I can think about it, that makes it a think, which is to say a thing. All things are thinks. They are as much of life as you can catch hold of in one thought. That means a think. So likewise, in German, denken, to think, ding, thing. In Latin, reor, to think, res, thing. So, if I make space into a think, I've somehow missed it. That's why we have to say it's a no-think. Why in Buddhism it is said the real nature of mind is no mind. And you realize this in daily life by the fact that when you see clearly, you see everything except your eyes. Except if there's something wrong with your eyes and you see spots in front, that interferes with seeing. If you hear clearly, you don't hear your ears. But if you have ear trouble, you get buzzing in your ears. Same way, if you are very healthy physically, you hardly notice your body, except as a kind of blissful vagueness, which is exhilarating, so on. And if your clothes are comfortable, you don't notice them.